And new books for May, history. This is probably going to be 3 videos. This particular pile I've got here there's a book on the natives, explorers, history of the East, and then on history, and then a Middle East book on the Middle East, and on the World War II. So I'll start with the natives. There's a little book on the Woodland Indians of the Western Great Lakes. This is by Ritzenthaler and Ritzenthaler, published in '70. And there's some pictures in here. I thought it'd be interesting to see kind of a study of anthropology, and you have to question where the origins of humanity could have been. They were in the Middle East, but in Africa, but civilization really began in the Middle East. And you have to wonder, well, why didn't civilization begin in North America? And I've been studying right now, here's some pictures, I've been studying right now the beginnings of man, and I might do a series on, I don't know, I don't have a lot of time, but I'd like to. And I believe the going theory right now is the reason why North American Indians were far behind technologically, never had the wheel, by the way, is that they were delayed because they arrived over is it called the Bering Strait? I think that's it. Between Alaska and Russia, there used to be a land bridge there, and they came over during the hunting period. They came over there and migrated as hunters must. This one particular fact I'll share with you is, I believe it was that one hunter can survive off the animals and one family, one person, I don't remember now. Maybe it was like 2 people or something. It requires like 2 square miles, or maybe it was 4 square miles of territory a person needs to survive. Otherwise it's crowding, because you have to kill an animal once a day or maybe once every other day. You need square miles of land. So of course, as human population increased, they had to just spread out as far as they could. And a lot of the migration was probably because of war, was because of violence between people. And so people left and fled and moved away and tried to stay away from each other, I guess. So once the beginning of agriculture came along, then he's getting people together. Here's a book on the explorers of North America, 1492. What does that remind you of? 1492. Somebody sailed the ocean blue. Who was that? To 1806. I'm interested about the explorers, especially there's a cook. There's a cook, I think he went around South America. So anyways, this will be an interesting book to read about different explorers. This is by John Bartley Brebner, and it is published in '33, first published. This one is 55. Another one on the explorers, New Lands, New Men, America and the Second Great Age of Discovery by William H. Goetzmann, something like that. Nice hardcover, printed in '86. Has pictures in here. So what is the second age? What's the second age of discovery? So a couple things here. This book apparently is a part of a trilogy by the same author. One of the books he wrote in the trilogy is called Army Exploration in the American West, 1803 to 1863. And the other one I don't know, but he mentions here that this particular book, he broadens the context, and he sees that, I kind of found the thesis here, he says the spread of science can be seen more clearly and dramatically through the activities of explorers reaching out to all parts of the globe than through looking at any other human endeavor. Hence the reason for this book. There's the kind of the premise. So I thought this book was just about explorers, but it looks like it's even broader. That's probably the most important thing about looking at and reading these things, is trying to get a broader context. It's not about the facts. It's just about what was really going on. Broader abstractions and generalizations that one can make from different periods of time. That's where the real learning begins, I think. Okay, so now a few books on the East. Here's A History of Modern Japan by Richard Storry. I've been finding a lot of these little pelican books. You notice these little pelican ones. I've got some really old ones too when I do the next video on history of antiquity or something. I don't know what I'll call it. This is 6070. So History of Modern Japan. So I wonder where it begins. You wonder whether modern Japan, I imagine modern Japan's going to begin like the 20th century, but you would think maybe they would have started after World War II, because that was a significant change for Japan after they were bombed and their government taken out and replaced. You would think that would be the good place to start. It does say, the first sentence here, it says, in the bright autumn sunshine of a day in November 1940. I don't know when the bombs were dropped. What year were the bombs dropped in World War II on Japan? I don't know. But anyways, I thought that'd be interesting. I kind of hope, I don't know how far it goes. Well, I guess only to 1970, or 1960. 1960 is when the book was published. I just wonder whether it comments at all on what the changes that were made to the Japanese government, if that made a difference to the culture. Well, I think they have a richer economy than China, so maybe it did. Okay, here's another Pelican book, The Birth of Communist China, by C.P. Fitzgerald, published in 64, 68, 52, 64. I don't know, what video did I say it in? One of the other book videos from May, I mentioned that I was interested in China because I wondered why it turned communist. Why didn't Europe turn communist? Why China? Why Russia? Why those places? Curious as to what creates such a place. What kinds of political ideas take root. Is it possible that no one had heard of the word freedom and liberty in China? I don't think so. I imagine they were just not favored. So I'll be very interested in this book. I'll see if I can find a little piece for you from it. Okay, it doesn't really say anything substantial. It seems like there's just a lot of things that have influenced China, but he does conclude that that communist China wasn't an inexplicable freak, but a logical development of an immensely long past. So he seems to say it was inevitable. He says things like the Manchu dynasty, different dynasties, and there's Manchu and Wu and Ming. The Ming dynasties, those kind of had different revolutions and eventually formed one nation. Influences of Confucianism and Christianity, and Japanese and Russian influences. So it seems like there's a lot of things at play. Okay, here's a nice one. History as the Story of Liberty, Benedetto Croce, C-R-O-C-E. This was published in 41. Reminded me of Grayling. A.C. Grayling wrote a book called something about liberty. I don't remember what the title is now. I guess I could find it. I've actually got it right here. It's called Toward the Light of Liberty. That's probably, this is going to be the same book, I would say, but I will certainly have a look. I did read A.C. Grayling's book, and it's very good. It's very well written. I remember there was one thing, there was a beef I had with I think A.C. Grayling takes the view that the Industrial Revolution was really bad, people working in child labor in factories and all that. And I think that's a little ridiculous. One has to ask what the alternatives were at the time. So kids working on farms 24 hours a day is better than children working 10 hours a day in a factory. I wonder. That seems ridiculous. But it's a narrative today. It's an unquestioned narrative today. Anyways, a book on the history of liberty, and although actually it seems like the book actually is liberty as the driving force for history. There are many theories about what drives history. One certainly comes to mind is psychohistory, Lloyd Dumas' psychohistory, that parenting practices drive history. I'm sure Marx has a different view than that. Karl Marx would probably say that, I don't know, labor, conditions of labor, or the labor power drives history, something like that. The back of the book is worth saying, but just like a little bit of it. He says here that the history must be considered primarily as the history of liberty, which operates through all human events. It is the business of the historian to discover this basic element in relation to its context, and to draw out the depths of the past, not only the facts themselves, but also the moral truths and impulses which underlie them. He therefore condemns as inadequate and unhistorical writing which consists merely of collections of facts, chronicles, as well as history written to claim superiority for any group, idea, or tendency. And then he says at the end that history shows that man is constantly attempting to, fulfillment of man's capacities is kind of the driving force for history. And he believes that liberty is I guess, a driving force. I guess that's probably the best way to put it. So, okay, here's a couple books on, maybe I'll do them last. I'll do the Middle East. Here's a book on the Middle East, Armageddon in the Middle East, by Dana Adams Schmidt, Arab versus Israeli through the October War. The New York Times Survey Series, I don't know what that is. This was published in 1974. It's just a book on the Israeli-Arab conflict, I guess, although it's old, it's in the 70s. And talking about Palestinian commandos, struggle, guerrilla, and conventional warfare. The Fourth Arab-Israeli War. You may know that Israel was created out of war operations for World War II. And ever since, the Palestinians have been pissed off. They don't have a country, I guess. So anyways, it's a mess down there. It's been that way for a while. Here's A.G.P. Taylor's The Origins of the Second World War. I'm glad to have this because it's a question. It's an interesting question. What gave rise to the Second World War? World War I was the war to end all wars. And it didn't fulfill its that expectation. I've got a book on the Canadian account of World War I, in which World War I is called the World War. They had no idea that it was actually only the beginning. And so I'm interested about the origins because in many cases, one origin that I have considered is the economic devastation that World War I reparations did to Germany and Austria. And in that case, that those conditions radicalizing the population, much like poverty radicalizes populations that seem to contribute to terrorism activities today. I wonder whether those same conditions occurred for Germany in 1920s and mid and early 30s and 30s. And so I'm curious about that theory for the origin of the Second World War, in a sense giving rise to Hitler. Because what if Hitler was not put into power? What if somebody else was? Was it just Hitler? Was Hitler the complete driving force for World War II and then even Nazi atrocities? or perhaps it was a group of people. You may have heard of Goebbels and Goering, and there's another guy, can't think of his name now, but Hitler, was he one monster, or was he a sign of the times? So, interesting. Okay, now a couple books on history itself. Here's a book called What is History by E.H. Carr, with 2 R's. This is 61, 1980. And, well, that's just exactly what it is. Problems in history for historians. For example, it says here, causation in history. History is progress. I imagine they talk about perspective. How specific should one look? Remember that one book I just talked about, the Liberty one. What was it called? History as a Story of Liberty. It says here that history should be written in a context to try to find the essence of what's driving the course. It shouldn't just be about facts. Well, that would be historical. That would be an argument that historians would have with one another. Should one just report facts and leave it up to the reader to make conclusions? Should one report facts and make conclusions, or maybe separate them? What is the job of the historian? Are they just to document, or are they to comment? So these will be some of the problems that historians will have to deal with. So that's that one. And another one, similar. I think it's similar. The Death of the Past by J.H. Plumb. J.H. Plumb, 6973. Let me find a piece for you here. So one piece in the back here, he says, if history is to teach us wisdom and a belief in our value as human beings, the author believes we need a reappraisal of the historical discipline, not a retreat into antiquarianism. He also, at the beginning here, he says, is a sense of the past now irrelevant? Are professional historians bypassing the use of imaginative reconstruction? Does a refuge in objective standpoints divorce history from modern life? It's hard to tell what his opinion is here. I don't know if he certainly doesn't sound like someone who just wants to report facts. At the same time, though, he sounds like he's leaning on the edge of invention, or in the sense of a historian is expected to make broad generalizations on history. I think a balance needs to be in there somewhere. I think he's probably leaning towards sensationalizing history, but we'll see about that one. And last one for this pile, the Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. You may know Will and Ariel Durant. I've got several of their works. I've got their entire Story of Civilization on the bottom shelf down there. I'm currently working through the very first one, which is called Oriental Heritage, I think. It's an 11-volume series, and the entire series is the length is about, well, foot and a half in length of width of the books, and as well as Will Durant wrote the Story of Philosophy, which is a pretty good kind of philosophy. If you don't have any philosophical knowledge whatsoever and you're interested in being educated, I recommend that you pick up his Story of Philosophy and read it. If you have some distaste, if you're horrified reading nonfiction, there's a fictionalized version, which just means it's put into a story. You can get Sophie's World. That's a good one too. This is 1968. The Lessons of History. So his chapter headings are pretty simple. He has here history in the earth, biology and history, race and history, character and history, morals, religion, economics, socialism, government, history and war, growth and decay. Is progress real? I have a book on progress. Can't think of the guy's name, but funny enough, I can remember the cover picture. Called The Idea of Progress. I think that's interesting. It's funny because people who don't like the current circumstances are going to conclude that progress is not occurring. But people who do like the circumstances are going to say that progress is occurring. So And I guess it also, you really have to consider what you're measuring for progress. How about standard of living or length of human life? That could be a standard to measure progress. At the same time, some people might say, well, why would we measure progress that way if the last 10, 15 years of, well, the last 10 years of a person's life is usually in a nursing home? Why would we, is that really an extension of life? So anyway, there's a disagreements about what we could really measure as progress, but anyways, that's it for what was this, random history kind of for May. Next piles will be, I've got a whole bunch of stuff on American beginnings of America. That'll be I'm sure that'll be a pile, and then the other pile is a mix of Britain, Canadian, war. I think that's maybe not war because I've got that World War II one there. I don't know what the other one is, but anyways, that's it for this section. I've got one more here that I should have included already with the other section. Why some wars never end. The stories of the longest conflicts in history by Joseph Cummins. This was printed in 2010. This one was $1 or something on Amazon. It's got colored photos in here, and I thought it was worthwhile. I thought there was one. He talks about wars in here, but I thought there was something interesting that I didn't think was a war that was ongoing. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking about, but obviously one can look at terrorism today, Arab-Israeli conflicts as wars that are not ending. Anyways, that'll be with the other history section.